Okay, let's try this one again. Let's try it again, I should say. All right, today is the 13th day of September 2024. My name is Brant. That is. My channel is Certainly What is True. I'm reading a book from author Firstenberg called The Invisible Rainbow. And the chapter I'm reading is Suspended Animation. This is chapter 14, that is. So let's get into the work here. Thank you for being here. This is all very enlightening. I hope that some of you will take this seriously, though, or you may be suffering in the future because of this. So, suspended animation. This is by, again, author Firstenberg, chapter 14. We admonish mankind to observe and distinguish between what conduces to health and what to a long life. For some things, though they exhilarate the spirits, strengthen the faculties, and prevent diseases, are yet destructive to life, and without sickness being on a wasting old age, while there are others which prolong life and prevent decay, though not to be used without danger to health. That's from a quote from Sir Francis Bacon. Another quote here from Donald R. Griffin, Listening in the Dark. Every animal has allotted to it a constant number of heartbeats per lifetime. If it lives fast and furious like a shrew or a mouse, it will use up its quota of heartbeats in a much shorter time than it is of a metabolic personality is more temporal one. Quote from Donald R. Griffin. In 1880, a gentleman named George Miller Beard wrote his classical medical book on urethania, titled A Practical Treatise on Nervous Exaltation. He made an intriguing observation, quote, although these difficulties are not directly fatal, and so do not appear in the mortality tables, although on the contrary, they may tend to prolong life and to protect the system against febrile and inflammatory diseases, yet the amount of suffering that they cause is enormous, end quote. In American nervousness, its causes and consequences, written a year later for the general public, he reiterated the paradox. Side by side with the increase of nervousness, and partly as a result of it, longevity has increased, end quote. Along with migraine headaches, ringing in the ears, mental irritability, insomnia, fatigue, digestive disorders, dehydration, muscles and joint pains, heart palpitations, allergies, itching, intolerance of foods and medications. In addition to this general degradation in the public health, the world was witnessing an increase in the human lifespan. Those who were suffering the most tended to look young for their age and to live longer than average. At the end of American nervousness appears a map showing the approximate geographic reach of urethania. It was the same as the reach of railroads and telegraphs, I should say, being most prevalent in the northeastern where the electric tangle was densest. Quote, the telegraph is a cause of nervousness, the potentiality of which is little understood, end quote. This was written long ago, folks, wrote Beard. Okay? This was written long ago. 1880. This is over 100 and almost 150 years ago. What Beard, an electrotherapist and a friend of Thomas Edison, who was shortly to be diagnosed with diabetes, did not figure out was that the growing cloud of electromagnetic energy, which permeated air, water, and soil wherever telegram lines advanced, had something to do with the growing numbers of urethania and diabetes that sought his administration. He was astute enough, however, to make the connection between longevity and disease and to understand that the modern expansion of lifespan did not necessarily mean better health or a more excellent life. He's right. If you're sick for 20 years, you can't do anything, you can't enjoy life, what's the point, you see? Mysterious extension of years among individuals who were the sickest was in fact a warning that something was terribly wrong. Fasting and austerity diet had been recommended since antiquity for the rejuvenation of the body. The prolongation of life, said Francis Bacon, should be one of the purpose of medicine, along with the preservation of health and the cure of diseases. Sometimes, he added, one must make a choice. Quote, the same thing which conduce to health do not always conduce to longevity. But he laid down one sure rule. Those who wish to follow it, that further are three goals of the physician. Quote, a spare and almost Pythagorean diet, such as is prescribed by the stricter orders of monastic life, or the institution of hermits, which regard want and pindar as their rule, produces longevity. So 300 years, end quote, 300 years later, Bacon's third arm of medicine was still sorely neglected. Quote, what must one do, or rather what must one not do to attain the extreme limits of age, end quote, asked Jean Finot, F-I-N-O-T, in 1906. Quote, what, after all, are the boundaries of life? These two series of questions together constitute a special science, gerontocomia. It exists in name only, end quote. Observing the animal world, she saw that the length of adolescence had something to do with the length of life. A guinea pig's period of growth endures 7 months, that of a rabbit 1 year, of a lion 4 years, of a camel 8 years, of a man 20 years. Human initiative was misguided, says Finot. What conducts to health and vigor does not necessarily prolong life. Quote, the education and instruction given to children, end quote, he wrote, are in flagrant contradictions to this law of gerontocomia. All of our efforts tend towards the rapid advancement of physical and intelligent maturity, end quote. To prolong life, it would be necessary to do just the opposite. And one method, he suggested, was to restrict one's diet. In the early years of the 20th century, Russell Chittenden at Yale University, who is often called the father of American biochemistry, experimented on himself on volunteers at Yale. Over the course of 2 months, he gradually eliminated breakfast, settled into a pattern that consisted of a substantial midday meal, and a light supper at night. Although he was eating less than 40 grams of protein daily, 1/3 the amount then recommended by nutritionists, and only 2,000 calories. He not only suffered no ill effects, but the rheumatism in the knee disappeared, as did the migraine headaches and attacks of indigestion. Rowing a boat left him with much less fatigue and muscle soreness than before. His weight dropped to 125 pounds and remained there. After 1 year on this diet with funding from the Carnegie Institution and the National Academy of Sciences, he formally experimented on volunteers. They were 5 professors and instructors at Yale, 13 volunteers from the hospital corps of the Army, and 8 students, all thoroughly trained athletes, some with exceptional records in athletical events. He restricted them to about 2,000 calories and no more than 50 grams of protein per day. Without exception, his subjects' health was as good as before or better at the end of half a year, with gains in strength, endurance, and well-being. While children proved nothing about lifespan, the ancient recommendations have since been thoroughly subjected to the scientific method, and in all species of animals, from one-cell organism on up to the primates, proven accurate. Provided the animal receives the minimum nutrients necessary to maintain health, a severe reduction in calories will prolong life. There is no other method known that will reliably do so. So he shows these rats are both 964 days old. One is retarded growth, lifespan, ultimate body size, and age changes in the albino rat after feeding diets restricted in calories. The Journal of Nutrition, 1939. A severe restriction in calories will increase the lifespan of rodents by 60%, routinely producing 4- and 5-year-old mice and rats. Calorie restriction rats are not senile. Quite the opposite. They look younger and more vigorous than other animals their age. If they are female, they reach sexual maturity very late and produce litters at impossible old ages. The annual fish, what they call cynobees, live 3 times as long when restricted in food, and a wild population of brook trout double their lifespan, some trout living 24 years when food was scarce. Spiders fed 3 flies a week instead of 8, lived an average of 139 days instead of 30. Underfed water fleas lived 60 days instead of 46. Nematodes, a type of worm, more than double their lifespan. The Mala, I can't pronounce this, Vulgata, lives 2.5 years when food is abundant and up to 16 years when it is not. So as a part of discipline is what he's saying. Cows giving half the normal amount of feed each winter live 20 months longer. Their breathing rate was also 1/3 lower, and their heart rate 10 beats per minute less. During a 25-year-long study at the Wisconsin National Primate Research Center, the death rates of fully fed adult monkeys from age-related causes were 3 times the death rate of calorie-restricted animals. When the study ended in 2013, twice as many diet-restricted monkeys as fully fed monkeys were still alive. Calorie restrictions work whether it is lifelong or only doing a portion of life, whether it is begun early during adulthood or relatively late in life. The longer the period of restriction, the longer the prolongation of life. Calorie restriction prevents age-related diseases and delays or prevent heart disease and kidney disease, and drastically decreases the cancer rate. In one study, rats that were fed 1/5 as much food had only 7% as many tumors. In the monkeys, it reduced the cancer rate by half, heart disease by half, prevented diabetes, prevented atrophy of the brain, and reduced the incidence of endometriosis, fibrosis, and amyloidosis, ulcers, cataracts, and kidney failure. Other diet restriction monkeys have less wrinkled skin and fewer age spots, and their hair is less gray. A national human experiment existed in 1977. There lived 888 people over 100 years old in Japan. The greater concentration of whom lived on the southwestern coast and a few islands. The percentage of centenarians on Okinawa, which is where the blue zone is what Dr. Bill McGraw talks about, was the highest in Japan, 40 times higher than any of the northeastern prefectures. Yasuo Kagaga, a professor of biochemistry at Jichi Medical School, explains, quote, people in areas of longevity have a lower calorie intake and smaller physique than those in the rest of Japan, end quote. The daily diet of school boys and girls in Okinawa was about 60% of recommended calorie intake. The reason calorie restrictions works is controversial, but the simplest explanation is that it slows metabolism. While the aging process is not fully understood, anything that slows the metabolism of cells must slow the aging process, is what they're deducting. The idea that we are each allotted a fixed number of heartbeats is ancient. In modern times, Max Rumner of University of Berlin in 1908 proposed a variation on the idea. Instead of a fixed number of heartbeats, our cells are allotted a fixed amount of energy. The slower an animal metabolizes, the longer it will live. Most mammals, that is Rumner, calculated used about 200 kilocalories per gram of body weight during their lifetime. For humans, assuming a lifetime is 90 years, the value is about 800. If an individual is able to delay the use of that amount of energy, his or her life will be correspondingly longer. Raymond Pearl at the Johns Hopkins University published a book along these lines in 1928 titled The Rate of Living. During 1916 and 1917, Jacques Loeb and John Norfolk at the Rockefeller Institute experimented on fruit flies. Since flies are cold-blooded, their metabolism can be slowed merely by lowering the ambient temperature. The average duration of life from egg to death was 21 days at a temperature of 30 degrees Celsius, at 39 days at 25 degrees, and at 54 days at 20 degrees Celsius, 124 days at 15 degrees Celsius, and 178 days at 10 degrees Celsius. The rule that low temperatures prolong life applies to all cold-blooded animals. Another common way animals reduce their metabolism is by hibernating. Hibernating species of bats, for example, live on average 6 years longer than the species that don't. And bats live for longer than other animals their size because, in effect, they hibernate on a daily basis. Bats are active. while on the wing hunting for dinner, only a few hours each night. They sleep the rest of the time, and sleeping bats are not warm-blooded. Quote, it is sometimes possible in the laboratory to keep a regna thermocouple in place while a bat settles down for a nap, end quote, wrote bat expert Donald Griffin. Quote, and in one such case, the body temperature fell in an hour from 40 degrees when the bat was active to 1 degrees, which was almost exactly the temperature of the air in which it was resting. End quote. This explains why bats weighing only a quarter of an ounce can live more than 30 years, while no laboratory mouse has ever lived more than 5. Calorie restriction is the only method of prolonging life that works for all animals, warm-blooded, cold-blooded, hibernators, and non-hibernators. Obviously, slow metabolism, as measured by how much oxygen an animal consumes. Food-restricted animals always use less oxygen. The controversy arose among Geroniculus, sorry about that, I butchered that word, because food-restricted animals also lose weight, and oxygen use per unit weight does not necessarily decline, but it declines where it counts. In humans, the internal organs, despite comprising less than 10% of our weight, are responsible for about 70% of our resting energy use. And it is our internal organs, not our fat or muscle tissues, that determine how long we will live. As researchers into the aging process have emphasized, the engine of our lives in the electron transport system in the mitochondria of our cells. It is there that the oxygen we breathe and the food we eat combine at a speed that determines our rate of living and our lifespan. That speed, in turn, determines by our body temperature and by the amount of food we digest. But there's a third way to slow our rate of living, and that is by poisoning the electron transport chain. One way to do this is to expose it to an electromagnetic field. And since the 1840s, as a gradual but accelerating rate, we have immersed our world and all biology in a thickening fog of such fields that exert forces on the electrons in our mitochondria and slow them down. Unlike calorie restrictions, this does not promote health, though. It starves our cells not of calories, but of oxygen. Resting metabolic rate does not change, but maximum metabolism does. No cell, no brain cell, no heart cell, no muscle cell can work to its capacity. Where calorie restrictions prevent cancer, diabetes, and heart disease, electromagnetic field promote cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. Where calorie restrictions promote well-being, oxygen deprivation promotes headaches, fatigue, heart palpitation, brain fog, and muscular aches and pains, but both will slow overall metabolism and prolong life. Industrial electricity in any of its forms always injures. If the injury is not too severe, it also prolongs life. In an experiment funded by the Atomic Energy Commission, exposure to simple electric shock for 1 hour each day throughout adulthood increases the average lifespan of a mouse by 62 years. Radio waves also increase lifespans. In the late 1960s, a proton accelerator was being built at Los Alamos National Laboratory that was going to use radio waves at a frequency of 800 millihertz. As a precaution, 48 mice were enrolled in an experiment to see if this radiation might be dangerous for workers in the facility. 24 of the mouse were irradiated at a power level of 43 milliwatts per square centimeter for 2 hours a day, 5 days a week for 3 years. This is a huge exposure that is powerful enough to produce internal burns, and indeed 4 of the mouse died from burn injuries. A 5th mouse became so obese that it could not be extracted from the exposure compartment, and it died there. In other words, it couldn't even get it out. It gained weight. But the mice that were not directly killed by the experiment lived a long life, on average 19 days longer than the unexposed mice. In the late 1950s, Charles Susskind of the University of California, Berkeley, received funding from the Air Force to determine the legal dose of microwave radiation in mice and to investigate its efforts on growth and longevity. At the time, the Air Force thought that 100 milliwatts per square centimeter was a safe dose. He soon found out that it was not. It killed most mice within 9 minutes. So after that, Susskind only exposed the mice for 4.5 minutes at a time. He irradiated 100 miles for 59 weeks, 5 days per week for 4.5 minutes a day at a power density of 109 milliwatts per square centimeter. Some of the irradiated mice who subsequently died developed extraordinary high white blood cell counts and had enlarged lymphatic tissue and enormous liver abscesses. Testicular degeneration occurred in 40% of the eradicated mice, and 35% developed leukemia. However, the unirradiated mice, although they were much healthier, did not live as long. After 15 months, half the control mice were dead, and only 30% of the irradiated rats ones. From 1980 to 1982, at Chang Quan Cho and author William Kai led a famous experiment at the University of Washington. They had a contract with the United States Air Force to investigate the safety of the early warning radar stations recently installed at Beale Air Force Base in California and on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, known as PAWS, P-A-V-E, PAWS, P-A-W-S. These were the most powerful radar stations in the world, emitting a peak effective radiated power of about 3 billion watts and irradiating millions of Americans. No one told us this, did they? The University of Washington team approximated the PAWS signal at a very low level, irradiating 100 rats 21.5 days, 70 days a week, for 25 months. The specific absorption rate, approximately that of the average cell phone today, was 0.4 watts per kilogram. During the 2 years of experiments, the exposed animals developed 4 times as many malignant tumors as the control animals, but they lived on average 25 days longer. Recently, dermatologists at the University of Illinois exposed cell cultures of mouse fibroblasts to radio waves that is 50 millihertz at 0.5 watts for either 0.5 and 15 or 30 minutes at a time, twice a week. The treatments lower the mortality rates of the cells. The greater the exposure time, the lower the mortality, so that the 30-minute exposure reduced cell death by 1/3 after 7 days and increased their average lifespan from 118 days to 138 days. Even ionizing radiation, X-rays, and gamma rays will prolong life if not too intense. Everything from Panamida to coddling moths to rats and mice to human embryo cells have had their average or maximum lifespan increased by exposure to ionizing radiation. Even wild chipmunks have been captured, irradiated, and released, and had their average lifespan thereby extended. Reginald Soha and Robert Allen, who irradiated houseflies in Southern Methodist University, discovered that at moderate doses, an increase of lifespan occurred only if the flies were placed in compartments small enough so that they could not fly. They concluded that radiation always produces 2 opposite kinds of effects: injuries effects that shorten the lifespan, and a reduction in basal metabolo rate that lengthens the lifespan. If the dose of radiation is low enough, the net effect is a lengthening of lives despite obvious injuries. Lauren Coruscant and Betty Jackson at the University of Washington School of Medicine reported that rats exposed daily to moderate doses of gamma rays for a year had their lives extended on average by 50%, but suffered a significant increase in tumors. So their oxygen consumption was reduced by 1/3. Egon Lorenz at the National Cancer Center exposed mice to gamma rays 1/10 of a roentgen per 8 hours, beginning at 1 month of age and for the rest of their lives. The irradiated females live just as long, and the irradiated males 100 days longer than the unirradiated animals, that is. But the irradiated mice develop many more lymphomas, leukemias, and lung, breast, and ovarian, and other types of cancers. Even extremely low doses of radiation will both injure and extend lifespans. Mice exposed to only 7 centigrades per year of gamma radiation, only 20 times higher than their background radiation, had their lives extended by an average of 125 days. Human fibroblasts exposed in cell culture once for only 6 hours a day, or the same level of gamma rays that is received by astronauts in space, or during certain medical exams, live longer than the unexposed cells. The human embryo cells exposed to very low doses of X-rays for 10 hours a day had their lifespans increased by 14 to 35%, although most of the cells also suffer several kinds of damage to their chromosomes. Modern medicine can take some, but not all of the credit for the modern increase in the average human lifespans. But that increase began a century before the discovery of antibodies, in a time when doctors still bled their patients and dosed them with medicines containing lead, mercury, and arsenic. But medicine can take none of the credit for the modern extension of the maximum human lifespan. Medicine still does not pretend to understand the aging process, and only a tiny minority of doctors are even beginning to try to do anything to reverse aging. Yet the maximum age of death worldwide has been steadily rising. Sweden has the most accurate and longest continuous record on the extreme limits of human age of any country, dating back to 1861. They revealed that the recorded maximum age of death was 100.5 years in 1861. That it rose gradually but steadily until 1969, when it was 105.5 years, and that it has risen more than twice as fast since then, reaching 109 years by the turn of the 21st century. So they have a graph here showing that. In 1969, the trends in both Swedish longevity and Swedish cancer accelerated. It was the year color TV and UHF TV were introduced into the country. In 1994, Vladno Konecto, former United Nations advisor on demographic and social statistics, showing that the number of people living more than 100 years was increasingly spectacular in the 28 countries for which good data existed. The number of centenarians in Sweden had risen from 46 in 1950 to 579 in 1990. So these people were over 100 years old. So it increased tenfold. During the same period, the number of centenarians had risen from 17 to 325 in Denmark, from 4 to 141 in Finland, and from 265 to 4,042 in England and Wales, from 198 to 3,853 in France, and from 53 to 2,528 in West Germany, which was once divided, from 104 to 2,047 in Italy, from 126 to 3,126 in Japan, and from 14 to 196 in New Zealand. The number of centenarians in all of these countries roughly double every 10 years, had far outraced the increase in population. Even in Okinawa, long known for its longevity, there lived only a single person over 100 years old as late as 1960. In Japan as a whole, noted Kagawa in 1978, the number of male centenarians had quadrupled in only 25 years, while the number of female centenarians has septupled. And yet he observed in middle-aged Japanese almost a doubling in the rates of breast cancer and colon cancer, a tripling of lung cancer, and a 40% rise in heart disease, and an 80% rise in diabetes. Quote, extended life expectancies, but increased diseases, end quote. So the explanation for both phenomena is electricity that travels through wires as well as earth, that radiates through air as well as bones. We are all, to an extent, that has been intensifying for 160 years in a mild state of suspended animation. We live longer, but are less alive than our ancestors. So that is the end of chapter 14. So we're going to continue. We're going to stop at this point. It's time to eat, it is. For me, it is. So I appreciate you being here. Again, this was probably going to be the last talk on this particular topic, since I've spent probably the last 10 days or more on this particular book. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you will realize that what is being shared here is very important. Author Firstenberg has done, he's got, I'll say one more quick thing about him. This book is roughly, hold on a second here, let me get to the point here on the pages show. It's, he has enormous amounts of what I call footnotes, or we wouldn't call them footnotes, but endnotes. In college, we would do that because the footnotes were always at the foot of the page. But all these are what I call endnotes. So this means they're all at the end of the book. And he wrote 15 chapters, and the 15 chapters enormously long. It's pretty long. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that tonight. It's getting late. So, but I think he's got probably over 100 pages or near that of footnotes. I'm trying to get down there. I can. Bear with me as I continue to scroll down. There's another chapter here that actually deals with bees and birds also. Well, the bees are having issues. Just bear with me here. Hopefully I can get down here. I want to give a specific, number here so I can have a good idea. Because the guy's done a lot of work in this book. And I think it was written maybe 10 years ago, maybe less than that. Also, he points out that certain radar actually has effect upon plants. He did a picture of that. So what she says something here. One thing they talk about is people who use phones at least 1 hour a day, they have headaches. And that's the ballooning of what I call migraines. Okay. Wow. I don't want to go too long here. I just wish this thing would scroll down quicker so I wouldn't miss it. So I'm trying to give you an idea here. Okay, the notes here. So yeah, they're roughly, they are, the book is 375 pages. But the whole total of the book is 514 pages. So there is actually roughly 140 pages of notes here, meticulously done. So at this point, I'm going to end the program. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you listening. Have a good evening. Take care.